Greetings in the name of Christ, everybody. I'm Lillian Daniel, Michigan Conference Minister, recently back from Germany. Just got back like less than 24 hours ago. So technically my brain is still located hovering somewhere above my body, somewhere else. But let us begin with prayer as we always do. Gracious God, we ask your blessing upon us, all those who gather here. We recognize the burdens that we bring to this space. We could have done so many other things in this moment where we carry sorrow or distraction or heartache. Place those burdens in the everlasting arms of Jesus, and let us open our hearts to one another in prayer and the confidence that the Holy Spirit is speaking among us. Amen. Friends in Christ, today our leadership lunch, our topics always come from our churches and our clergy, etc. So we're doing some internal housekeeping today. We have an annual meeting coming up on November 1st, and that is where we vote on the business of the body as a local church does. We pass resolutions. We get together for fun. On this occasion, we might even have a costume party, although that is not our traditional practice in the Michigan Conference. It may become an annual tradition. It may become a historic one-time only event. But today our agenda is to present a little overview of this historic annual meeting. Historic because our new general minister and president of the denomination, Karen Georgia Thompson, will be with us, and it's being held in the Northern Association, which hasn't happened for a while. So we'll get an overview of that from Jen Ringgold. Then we're going to talk about two resolutions that are coming up. One related to the use of psychedelics in the field of mental health. The other related to a merger of two of our associations. We're also going to have a chance to hear from our treasurer about the Michigan Conference budget and to ask questions, and then a little time just to visit and talk about logistics. So without further ado, I hand it over to Jen Ringgold, who is sort of speaking on behalf of the planning committee, because I should mention that our moderator, Diane Baker, is hiking the Camino Trail right now. And for some reason, didn't want to interrupt that pilgrimage to Zoom with us. But so Jen is stepping in to talk to us about annual meeting team plans.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. The annual meeting planning team has been working on this particular annual meeting since before last year's annual meeting. So there's been a lot of time and effort and planning to go into, Conference Minister just said, this historic location. We're doing a destination annual meeting this year and gathering at Crystal Mountain Resort and spending 2 days with an extra night in addition to those 2 days, if folks are able, together. It's been many years since we've done a 2-day event. Last year, we gathered for a 1-day event in person. And prior to that, we did several years online. And so this opportunity to really be in community with one another was a priority that came out of meeting with everyone last year in Grand Rapids and asking for more time for fellowship, more time to be together, more time to be in community, more time to network with one another. And so that will begin on Thursday night, Halloween, for the optional event that evening. I did put some links in the chat. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, for a folder that has access to all of our current annual meeting documents, including the draft agenda. And actually, I can share that while I'm talking right now, so you can kind of follow along. Give me one sec.
The first document I opened there, I couldn't open, so.
Okay. We will I will definitely check on that from a tech support standpoint. So we will be at Crystal Mountain Conference Center in Thompsonville, Michigan. There's a social event for everyone who is able to check in and register on Thursday evening, Halloween themed with optional costumes if you wish, not required. Our whole agenda for Friday during the day is nourishment of the spirit, right? This idea of what does it look like to be able to be in community together, learning, talking, and being. So there are 2 workshop times. There are 3 unique workshops that will be offered in each of those 2 blocks. So a total of 6 workshops, of which participants will get to choose 2. In that folder, there is also a description of all 6 workshops. Starting at 3 o'clock on Friday, we get this opportunity for associations to be together. The United Northern will be having their fall meeting. The Detroit Metro and Eastern will have time for a fellowship, and Covenant also has space booked to gather as well during that 3 to 5 time. Friday evening, the gist of all of our really business together begins at 5 o'clock, where we'll have educational sessions for those resolutions that you're going to hear about today. And then, Lillian, do you want to take just a minute to talk real quick about what's going to happen at 6 o'clock?
Yes, I'm going to have the opportunity to interview our new general minister and president. We're going to have some ecumenical guests with us, including one from the United Church of Canada. It'll be a chance for you all to ask questions about the state of the church across the country, the world, and then we're going to have some fun social time with music and a band afterwards.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That really opening chunk, that special space for all of us to be together with our general minister and president. Dinner and socializing will happen after that State of the Church conversation. And then, of course, on Saturday, we wake up to our very traditional agenda lineup of business, including hearings, worship together, the plenary space where we will have debate and voting, and then a keynote along with question and answer from our general minister and president. So that's the basic kind of arching overview of the timeline for October 31st through November 2nd. And I will pass it back to you, Conference Minister, to bring up on our first guest to talk about resolutions.
Yeah, so our first guest is Reverend Nathan Dannison, who is currently serving at the Fountain Street Church, which is not a UCC congregation, so he's out in the mission field and still beloved and considered one of our pastors. And this is a resolution and a topic, really, to be honest, that I learned about through Nathan and some of our other pastors. And so I'm, like many of you, being educated on something new. And the best of our resolutions play that role. They are not just about winning or losing or passing a vote, but they often are an opportunity for us to learn about a topic that is important to people and an ethical and moral issue of the day. So Pastor Nathan, please give us sort of a big overview of the resolution, and then let's have time for questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Reverend Daniel. So this resolution, it is entitled, make sure I get the correct title up here in front of me, the Ecumenical Engagement and Faithful Support for the Decriminalization of Entheogenic and Psychedelic Medicines. This resolution was an absolutely titanic effort, and due to the nature of the resolution submission process, I wasn't able to let the credits roll on how many human beings actually contributed to this. The materials that were produced over the course of these conversations will be beneficial for the church, and it has been a very helpful conversation. We successfully had 3 separate national forums related to this issue where we invited UCC clergy and members, as well as community partners nationwide to contribute to this conversation, the result of which is the resolution in its final 3-page form. I think that I just very recently, just to make sure that you've got the right draft in front of you, it should be the draft 8, and it should say October. Anybody who's written a resolution knows how this goes. There's another form of the resolution that is many, many, many pages longer. That is not the one that we will be submitting as per the guidelines. The names that are listed as submitters are UCC clergy and members who have been working on this project from within our conference. So that's the conference level. But our community partners include Decriminalize Nature from Michigan and Decriminalize Nature USA. They included representatives from our First Nation partners here in the state of Michigan, as well as the Psychedelic Bar Association, their attorneys, and MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Approach to Psychedelic Studies, which is an institution that has been working with St. Johns Hopkins Hospital on carrying out their psychedelic research studies. The cohort, for lack of a better term, represents an absolutely tremendous diversity of different interests. Part of this conversation was carried out with the assistance of our new harm reduction ministry at the national setting. Psychedelic medicine is often part of the harm reduction work that we do or that we're seeking to do. Also represented are First Nation communities that are either recognized or not recognized by the federal government. Included in this are physicians and psychologists and other therapeutic professionals. And there are folks that want to see a reduction in the current policing that is happening on our streets and in our communities. The possession of these substances is oftentimes illegal, but it also contributes to the ongoing failure of the war on drugs and increased incarceration efforts. So it's impossible for me to sort of explain all of the different stakeholders that were part of this conversation. And that was one of the challenges in bringing this resolution down to 3 pages. You have it before you. The resolution is based on our history, on our sacred scriptures, on our previous resolutions and commitments that we have passed as a national setting, historic commitment to scientific rigor, medical sciences, and our identity as a church that is in solidarity with many different communities. I think that is why it felt so important to have this be a broader effort than just folks within the UCC. Why is this coming to the Michigan conference right now and for the first time? Michigan, the Regulatory Affairs Committee of the Michigan Senate is currently debating the merits of Senate Bill 499, which is an act that will decriminalize the possession of many of these compounds for use in medical research and in harm reduction work. Michigan's not the only state that is considering this legislation. It has been considered in various other states, and California has an ongoing effort. But the Michigan Senate law specifically includes the use of a compound that's called ibogaine. Ibogaine is a medicine from West Africa that has had tremendous success in treating opiate addiction disease. That is a crisis in the state of Michigan, and that is one of the reasons why this bill exists in its current form. So this resolution seeks to voice support for the passage of Senate Bill 499 here in the state of Michigan. The resolution was crafted in such a way that should it pass our Michigan conference, it is turnkey ready for consideration at General Synod 35, which will be happening in Kansas City the end of June and the beginning of July. Okay, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Fantastic. Would people raise their hands or let me know if they have a question? I'm surprised. Is everyone already an expert on this topic? I see Galen is raising his hand.
Very interesting, complete introduction. What I was just curious, it sounds like there would have been some controversial issues that competed for attention in this. Is that worth knowing at this time, or does that take too long? But
No, I think that I could name a couple off the top of my head. So first of all, we did our very best to accurately represent that some of these compounds and medicines that we're discussing are man-made, and some of them are not. And within these communities of healing, there is divisiveness around this. Whether or not cannabis should be included as a psychedelic medicine was a topic of some debate, and it was input from some of our First Nation partners, specifically in the Southwest Conference, that encouraged the inclusion of that. And as far as other controversies, the man-made versus plant-based or fungus-based medicine conversation, we leaned into our member constituents who are part of the Veterans Services Committee. The use of MDMA specifically has had tremendous impact in that community for healing moral injury and trauma that comes along with complex PTSD. And we wanted to own that and lift that up because we are a denomination that seeks to support our veterans as well. So no, it wasn't without controversy. There was some concern around the use of the word decriminalization because of the implicit statement. If you're decriminalizing something, then you're also implying that the thing was criminal to begin with. And that was frustrating for some of our members. But the language that is used by our legislators frequently uses and reflects that language as well. So in the interest of clarity, we kept that term in there. And then again, I can't say enough good things about our new harm reduction ministry at the national setting. Just phenomenal human beings, and the care with which they invested in this process was apparent in each of the forums.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? I mean, yes, I see Cheryl Burke has a question.
Nate, in the biblical historical grounding, there's some definition of what the substances are that we're talking about. In the resolution itself, it's a broad category. How will people know what we're actually talking about? And are there different definitions of what the category or the actual substances are?
There are, and that documentation, a lot of it had to be left on the table
Right.
because it is a very broad range of substances. The Michigan Senate bill has a pretty tightly defined list of substances. We felt that by including the words entheogenic and psychedelic medicines, that we accurately captured the full spectrum of the inclusion of those compounds. So that's not a great answer, but that's the best I can do.
I'm just wondering if for annual meeting, there's a possibility of defining that more specifically for folks.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to learn how to put together a packet. There is some phenomenal research that's being produced by the folks at Pittsburgh Seminary through the Roman Catholic theologians that are working there on a pastoral approach to psychedelic ministry. There's also a great deal of research that's being produced by our friends on the West Coast on psychedelic assisted chaplaincy and the outcomes for those programs that also contain some pretty granular information about the use of these different substances.
Nathan, may I ask a sort of political horse race question? What are the estimated chances of this passing in the Michigan State House?
Right now, everybody was sort of waiting to see what Gavin Newsom was going to do in California. The California bill was left kind of squishy with some of its definitions. The folks at the Michigan Psychedelic Association have been working with the Regulatory Affairs Committee to get very granular and detailed information. Our current best understanding is that Governor Whitmer has indicated that should the bill in its current form land on her desk, she will sign it. The original Senate Bill 499 was a bipartisan piece of legislation that was introduced. by a Republican senator and a Democrat senator, both from sort of the middle of the state area. And so the Michigan bill, as it stands, is kind of our best bet.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments people have? I saw some in the chat, but and we will have a hearing on this at our annual meeting, that if you hear from other people who say, what is this? Or I'm concerned about it, etc., we really want them to go to the hearing. That's the place where people can ask the more in-depth questions. And we wanted to offer this opportunity just to the whole conference to plan ahead and to find out if people have questions. So thank you, Pastor Nathan. Very, very helpful. Our second resolution that's coming to us is of a very different nature. It's a lot of times I think of resolutions in the church as being looking at big ethical topics outside in the world, but also sometimes it's like the church doing its own business. And this next one is kind of the church doing its own business. We have a resolution that will come from the board of directors officially, but it is an opportunity for two associations within the Michigan Conference to come together and merge. And to tell us how that happened, we've got Galen Fisher with us from the Detroit Metro Association, who is going to talk about this merger with the Eastern Association in the Michigan Conference. We also have with us Cheryl Burke as a resource who's worked with both associations on this. But take it away, Galen.
Well, thank you very much. This is, I would say, a simpler issue to describe and relate. There is a resolution which it may be useful to, I can put it up on my screen so I can see it, but I don't know. I wasn't able to share a little bit ago if that's useful for everyone, but
Jen
maybe
can
not.
post the link to it in the chat.
Yeah, that's fine. But in late May, Reverend Burke contacted me and just to let me know that there were discussions going on relative to the Eastern Association, which is, for those of you not so clear, just sort of in the thumb region of most of the churches, just north of the Detroit area. And there's been a lot of joint meetings over the past couple of decades between the two associations. But the Eastern Association has been having a harder time as a smaller group of roughly 10 churches over that time, 10 churches now, having enough community to get together, have officers that could carry out all of the functions and so on. So the interest in having the churches be part of an organization related to the conference and have that support it seemed best be accomplished by having the Eastern Association churches be able to join the DMA, and effectively what one is doing then is expanding the boundaries of the Detroit Metropolitan Association further north to include all of the areas where the Eastern Association churches are. And so that is how the resolution is written. And there have been a number of meetings. We then had a meeting of our linking board, which is our group that runs the Detroit Metropolitan Association, expressed their support for exploring this issue, but didn't want to go too far in terms of saying that this was something we would do, but wanted to hear that the Eastern Association was also supportive of joining with the DMA.
And this is an
they had a
important
meeting.
point, Galen. I think that you all appropriately didn't want it to seem like you were the Borg taking over someone else. This organically came up through the Eastern Association.
Yes, very much so, because I mean, I wasn't aware that these discussions were going on. But certainly historically, over the last couple of decades, there's been discussion of, well, what we could all get together or whatever. But nothing has been done to really approach that until now. So we had that vote, as you're indicating, just to indicate that we were supportive of that sort of discussion. But yeah, we wanted to wait to see how the Eastern Association felt. On July 24th. I attended a Zoom meeting of that association in a role of being able to answer any questions that might come up. So I wasn't really obviously voting or anything. And they had a meeting, a good discussion, which there was a motion, and Reverend Kim Newport, who has been the previous moderator of that association, although they hadn't had an election in several years, ran that meeting, and it went very smoothly and led to, of those voting, it was unanimous and to go forward with that. And there were a few abstentions, but that was it. So then our linking board met in July and no, in August, and approved going forward with a resolution like this, and called for an association meeting, which of course we have to give warning for, which occurred on September 12th. And we also had a unanimous vote and a full quorum. We exceeded our quorum needs, which is always hard thing to do on a Zoom call in September. But anyway, so we passed on that motion to the board of directors, and they saw fit to bring this to the entire conference for support. I don't know if there are any
Thank
other
you.
questions.
Thank you, Galen. And I think I'll let Cheryl jump in too, and then we can ask questions of both of you. But Cheryl, do you want to give a little pastoral context as one who is walking alongside?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eastern Association for a while has been struggling to have the appropriate officers needed to have an association. They've tried meetings where nobody attends. It's just been difficult. They do have a functioning committee on ministry, so those functions have been working, luckily. And in conversation with the UCC Council, the best way to make this thing happen is to change the boundaries of DMA. It's kind of technical. I mean, they are coming together, you can say merging, but basically we're changing the boundaries. So the conference has to vote on changing the boundaries of an association. And so the resolution that comes to the conference annual meeting will be a little bit different than the one that Eastern passed, a little bit different than the one that DMA passed, with the idea that we would have this effective January 1st, 2025.
So a little review on UCC polity. If we were to draw an org chart, Jesus is the head of the church, and thus ends the hierarchy. From that point, everything kind of moves grassroots up in our polity. So the earliest associations between churches in the UCC, if you remember the congregational polity coming over in the early days, they didn't want to be a denomination. They were afraid of that coming over. These were early Reformed churches, but they formed associations to do the things they could not do alone. And out of that, later, we had these other bodies, conferences, national settings, different boards, but it always goes that direction. So the conference cannot impose this or redraw any lines. It's got to come up that way, if that makes sense to you all, just as Jesus intended it. And you could also make the argument that, and this is across denominations, but that we have perhaps two levels of judicatory where we probably need one or to rethink this. And so these are the kind of growing pains we go through across denominations. and figuring out what is the work of the association, the smaller local body. And also, when you look at how organic this process is, the way it ends up is you have associations of various sizes. So this was a very small association, and we had others that were very large. But again, you can't, in a top-down way, say, well, let's organize this differently. It's got to come this direction. So here we are. And any questions about that as we go into our financial? All right.
I'll just mention that we have, in light of your comment, I mean, 26 churches for sure, and 10 in the Eastern Association. So we would be a little bit smaller if this all goes forward than the Covenant Association, which has 40 churches. Although that kind of information is included in the resolution that we voted on, and both of them have the same message at the end that we would be joining together. So
Absolutely. Thank you. And there may be other reconfigurings that happen. I mean, if you look at our boundaries, associations, even conferences, they're always changing. That's a big topic. None of this was set in stone. Though my personal opinion is I like the size of the Michigan conference. Feel like it's not too big and not too small. It's big enough we can get things done, but we can know each other. And I think that's also the goal of the local associations too, is to have that ability to connect over meals and important things. All right, so now to the bread.
Maybe I could just make a point, as you have, but thanking Cheryl for her help in all of this, because she did started it off and made it all happen very smoothly. It also had a small amount, lesser support, but I should certainly acknowledge from Reverend Lawrence, because he was very helpful along the way for sure. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Galen, because you're a volunteer and you've put a tremendous amount of work into this. So thank you, and the DMA. So, all right. So speaking of volunteers, Volunteer of the Year award on October 2nd is going to our new treasurer, Shane Montoya. When I came to the conference, we were in a state of flux, and we have made tremendous progress to get to the point where we have an outstanding volunteer treasurer. We have readjusted some of our staffing around finances, and the short version is that we no longer have a financial person on staff, but we have moved that important stewardship of our resources to an accounting firm, the Raymond firm, which allows us new levels of transparency and accountability, along with the check and balance that is our volunteer treasurer here, Shane. And he's also worked hard to interpret our budget in a way that makes sense to the average person. And this year he's presenting a kind of narrative budget that he's gonna share with you right now.
Yeah, so I do have a master's in business, but at my heart, I am a pastor, and therefore I'm a words person, not necessarily a numbers person. I know enough numbers to be able to talk about them and communicate them, but they're not my natural language, is what I will say. So this is going to be a little more word and qualitative heavy than perhaps a traditional treasurer's report. I will kind of give you the highlights of what, especially on what has changed and what is new and what to keep an eye out for. I will be as brief as I can and allow for questions afterwards. I invite you. I did write a letter that is in your materials that will have that has both a 1.5-page long letter and a looks at our investments. There is the budget in there, Jen. I just realized I sent you I need to send you another copy of this. I did only the first page. This is a 4-page spreadsheet. It's supposed to be, and only send you the first 2 that got out, which is fine. This is the broad overview part, the 30,000-foot view. I also have available kind of the things that you might see in your own church budget, like how much is being spent on on buildings and grounds, how much is being spent on a more granular level. Those will be available shortly after this meeting, once I figure out how to get the export function to work on Microsoft Excel again. So sorry about that, but we'll dive in now. If you open up
Not a church meeting unless somebody can ask how much you spent on coffee.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure where that lives in our budget technically. But anyway, probably the MAT preparation budget or something like that. Anyway, the best place for us to start is at the beginning. There's no better place to begin than at the beginning. And at the first page, you'll see is our revenues. That's money that comes into the conference. And our conference budget is actually a lot like a church budget in many ways. Whereas churches have a plate and pledge that represents the giving from their members. We also get giving from our member churches. And we have that in the form of what's called the OCWM, our church's wider mission basic support. Now, in January, we did make a policy change at the board level to switch our policy of giving to be more in line with national trends. And if you look at there, so that means that when your church gives OCWM money as part of your special offerings, I hope you have a 5 for 5 church. Then 90% of that money stays with us at the Michigan Conference. 10% of that money goes on to national. Remember, however, that this is only for the basic mission, the basic support dollars. Other gifts make their way and get through the system, or either pass through or got through the system in different ways and different amounts. We are, like many churches, experiencing a decline in giving. It's a reality for many of us. My basic math, when I looked over the past few years, was about an 8% decline year over year over the past few years. So that's what I budgeted in for. However, our investment are doing okay. And that's been what's been helping us sustain ourselves financially. You'll see in it's supposed to be in this bigger packet, but you'll also see in that letter, we've had incredible growth in our investments. We're very thankful for the legacies of generosity that have been given to the conference that help us fund so much of our good work, including in the vital growth areas and our other mission area teams. Thank you for that. Special thank you to Stan Dole, who passed away earlier this year, who did a lot of work of actually individually picking out stocks for the Michigan Conference to invest in. Now, that might not be the strategy that we pursue going forward. We're probably going to shift that, but I do want to thank him and be thankful for his memory for that hard work that he did with the conference, and why we've seen such tremendous growth as well. If you look down into the restricted parts, so I once again want to give this the 5-minute explanation and not the 45-minute explanation. But you will see in that report that we have a big number of investments. We have a big number of $8.2 million. That does not mean that the Michigan Conference has $8.2 million to spend on whatever it wants to. We can't go and buy Lillian a private plane. That's not how this works. I know it's tough. And sorry if my screen freezes up, but I am still here with you. Instead, most of our, what I call our equity pool, that's the sum total of all our investments. A lot of that is made up of individual endowment funds, which were given by donors for specific purposes. You probably have these at your church if you've ever complained about the organ fund or the Edna Special Silverware Fund, or things like that can only be used for silverware. I did come across there was a church in New England that had something like $100,000 in an office supply budget, an endowment fund. That's what most of our money is in. That's what it's in. So this particular one, the screen that Jen has up, has the equity pools, what I'll call, and you'll see those pooled funds represent most of our endowment money. That and the Emmanuel Scholarship Fund, which is a separate fund, but also goes towards funding the Emmanuel scholarships. It's not quite as complicated as it appears at first, I promise. On the budget side, you will see all of those little funds under the restricted section, like the Ministerial Assistance Fund, the Emergency Fund, the Church Development Fund. Those represent the endowment funds within that pooled fund. We are now properly accounting for those, which is something that with a transition in staff and on accounting procedures, we weren't able to really do for the past couple of years. So when you see, that's why things look different than they did from last year's budget. Then move on to the expenses side of the table, which is on the next page of that. One of my goals has been for more transparency and that things sound like what they should be. There used to be this nebulous board of directors line, which didn't really say much. And it was used for things like legal expenses, professional services, things like that. The new use that is proposed in this budget, this has to be approved by the board, would be that board of directors line be used to help reimburse travel for board of directors to our different meetings out in different churches and also to our annual conference. We do not want to have our governing board be a pay-to-play operation. And that would go a long way towards helping folks who are poor be able to serve on the board of directors, to be honest, and not have it be something where the gifts are out of the largesse or out of or something where you have to come begging, but it's just the standard practice for that. We'll note this is a general Senate year. The last time that it was budgeted, when it was closer, was about this $55,000 mark. It might end up being, because General Senate is in Missouri, it might end up being more than that. So I just want you to take a look at that number. And that's part of why when you see that net number look so high, it's because of General Senate. And also, in my opinion, because of the existing buildings and grounds expenses that we have. We have to budget for them, even though, as you may know, we are in the process of trying to sell off our conference office and that land in East Lansing. It has not sold. We still need to maintain the property. So that's why that budgeted amount remains in there for the buildings and grounds. Even though we're not really using it except as storage. We are working to transition to deploy our staff. That has happened. That's on Lillian's side of things. And then this is a budget. Once you're able to see as I said, the other stuff, the account section with a little more detail, you will see that funding has shifted to, instead of one office internet, for example, instead there will be funds available to help subsidize the internet and copier utilities and things like that for our staff as they are deployed out in the field. So those are big things to look at. The other thing to note is this new two small things that I think are on the fun side. Yes, budgets can be fun. One is a proposal for a national initiative gift. As part of our OCWM, that change in that number that we were sending up to national, one thing that I thought it was very important was that we show a commitment from the Michigan Conference still to the work of the national office. It's not as though we think the work of the national office isn't relevant or isn't the church as much as the Michigan Conference is. It's just a difference of allocation of resources. My proposal for this is that a national initiative gift of $5,000 would then be able to publicize that and encourage our churches to give along specifically to that as well, and make it into a giving opportunity, a stewardship opportunity that would trickle down into the local churches. Then there's the last fun part, I'll say, is these ministry grants. These were the brainchild of Lillian and some of her work to get, I think and you can say more about this, but to get funds where they need to be working in our local churches for things that we've seen specifically. Lillian, do you want to talk about those? There's 4 areas of funds. Do you remember them off the top of your head, Lillian?
Well, yeah, but the high level version is that, in some ways we're well resourced. We have this amount of savings, this investment that then produces income. But at the same time, for many of our churches, they are struggling. And I'm really eager to get grant funding out there to our local churches, sort of in the manner of New Church Starts in the past, but we've been funneling some of that toward revitalization. Also, things that I dream of being able to do for our clergy, help them with sabbaticals. Some clergy can take a sabbatical, some have never had one in their life. Helping some of our smaller churches with technology, where a small amount of money can make a big difference to a church that has no online presence or no tech support. Things like this, where we're out there assisting churches with things they actually need. What we're not going to do, though, to speak frankly, is help fix the roof or help the church keep going for another 2 months. These would be gifts that would be oriented toward outreach or service to the community or some kind of hopeful growth in the future.
My favorite one is the community outreach grant that's proposed, which
Yes.
would could be anything from a prayer meeting or an evangelism event to a block party. I just think that could be loads of fun for so many of our churches and take away that hurdle from really connecting our churches to their communities. That is the big picture there. Are there any questions? And once again, those details will come up again. I'm sorry, that was my fault on my Excel side of things. It is, all that stuff is done, I promise you, and hasn't been changed. So it is ready.
Thank you, Shane. God bless you. And it is, so we always say that at the 12:45 hour, I always do the blessing now so that nobody feels awkward if they have to leave, and then we stay on and chat. So this is our 12:45 blessing. May the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ, which passes all human understanding, fill your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and the power of the Holy Spirit. Give bread to those who have none and a hunger and thirst for justice to those who have plenty. Amen. To those who wish to go in peace, you may. And to those who want to stay and visit for a minute or hear about my trip to Germany or ask questions about how much the coffee costs, feel free. It's good to see you all. Lawrence, I haven't seen you since I got back.